Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Well, I can hear myself, which is a good sign. Great to see you all. No pun intended. But firstly and foremost, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to this conversation on the transformation generation. Fundamentally, this conversation is about the fact that no matter where we are in life, no matter what life stage you're at, or transformative experiences we've gone through, the workplace in an ideal world should be a safe space where we can show up and bring our full selves. Unfortunately, that is not always the case, and there are still topics that are considered very much taboo in the workspace, whether that's hormonal changes that women go through, gender transition, periods, menopause, all of the above. So really the purpose of this conversation is for us to kind of look at ways we can start bringing these conversations to the fore and actually think about ways we can help each other understand each other better and fundamentally smash taboos. But before we dive into it, we're going to do some introductions. My name is Matilda Egere-Cooper. I am a Black woman wearing a long tie-dye dress, which has had a lot of compliments today. I have short cropped hair, I'm wearing a red lippy, and I'm also wearing black heels. Over to you.
Hi, I am Danny St. James. I am 6'1", so tall. I've got blonde hair, I'm wearing a red dress, and very white sneakers.
My name is Jane Wake, and I am 54 years of age, and I'm kind of medium height. And I'm actually wearing a skirt from the 90s, because you can do that when you're 54 years of age. A blue long skirt.
Hi, my name is Ruby. I'm a Nepali woman from Nepal. Today I'm wearing a blue long dress, white trainers. I'm 33 and 5'2", so quite short.
So before we actually get into the conversation, I actually want to share a little bit more about the panel itself. So Ruby Raut, you are the CEO and co-founder of, is it WUKA? Wake Up Kick Ass Wear, love it. The UK's first reusable period pants company. And then Danielle St. James, you are chief executive at Not a Phase, a charity that supports trans adults around the UK. And finally, Jane, you are a fitness professional and expert with more than 30 years experience working with women at different life stages, from prenatal to postmenopause. Fantastic. So, given the fact that we are exploring taboos in the workspace, can you think back to a time where you either had a situation or there was something that you were going through where you felt if you brought it up at work, it might be a little bit #awkward? So can you think back to something or a moment where you thought, this might be a little bit challenging to talk about, and if you can maybe share what that felt like?
Yeah, I've got one actually. So before COVID, before all the lockdowns, I was working for a recruitment firm on Cannon Street in London, and I needed to book some extended sick leave to have some surgery done, transition-related surgery. And I was told that I would have to have a meeting with my CEO to book this time off. She was a scary woman. This woman was a viper. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. So yeah, I went in and she in-depth questioned me on everything that I had done, on the details of this surgery and what. It was just really, really intense. And then at the end she said, you know, I was wondering why it is that you work here. And I said, you know, the usual stuff to your CEO. Oh my God, I love my job. It's close to my house, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, my daughter Googled you last night, and aren't you some sort of celebrity in tranny land? Like, point blank. And within the company, I'd had a few of those experiences. And I think because I had nobody to talk to within the company, and the culture of it was just that you could say whatever you wanted, and I never felt able to go to anybody and talk about how that felt or how wrong it was. Thankfully, well, not thankfully for COVID, but I ended up not even needing to have that time off because COVID came around and delivered the time off anyway. But yeah, not great experiences. Things like that along my career path of working for other people have definitely shaped the way that I approach companies when I go in as a consultant for DE&I strategy and policy now.
Okay, good. Thank you for like setting us up, because I'm sure similarly you've had experiences where it's been a little bit challenging to bring up topics, if you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only ever worked for one company for a very short length of time. So I've been freelance and a consultant for a very long length of time. So I have contract work. And I was pregnant with my second child. And I had started up a new business, and I was sponsored as an athlete. Sports, my background. And I'd continued through my contract. I was pregnant. I'd carried all the way through. I kept on doing all the work just as much, and when your work's physical and you're pregnant, it's, I mean, I know a lot about it. It's my job, so I know it was safe for me to do that. But you do get looked at in a little strange way. Should she be doing that? Is it okay for her to do that? And so you have this sense of inferiority. It's a real feeling of people are looking at me like I shouldn't be doing this. And then at that time, and we're going back, this is going back about 15 years, so I hope things have changed a little bit since then. But when it came for my contract to be renewed, I said what I was doing and that I was focusing now, particularly on women in pregnancy and post-birth, and they decided not to renew my contract. Like it was too much of a thing that was too much of a minority, it wouldn't interest enough people. Why would we want to do that as a big company?
Gosh, wow. Okay, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, I guess the fundamental reason that I started WUKA was because of taboos around periods. So taking back to Nepal, where I grew up, even if now if you go to Google and search periods in Nepal, all you will see is young girls in a tiny hut. So we have this tradition, which is illegal at the moment, called chopadi, where girls and women are banished for bleeding. So every 5 days, when you have your period, you go to this menstrual hut or a cow shed, and you are untouchable. Food are often brought to you, and almost treated like an outcast. When I had my first period at 12, I had to do the similar kind of thing. I was sent to my aunt's house. I thought I was staying with my cousin, which was great, but when I reached over there, it's basically a room, a bowls and a plate on the floor. My mum gave her old sari cut into pieces and said that these are menstrual product. Next 7 days, you're gonna go stay at at your aunt's house. You can't see dad. You can't go to kitchen. You can't go anything. So until I came here 20 years, up until 20 years, every 4 days, basically, I was untouchable, untouchable from anybody else. So that taboo has really ingrained in me. And then when I came here, it was like almost like a freedom was given to me. Like I could do anything I want to. I can go and get water, whatever I want, food, whatever I want. I don't have to tell anybody that I was on my period. So I think taking that memory back of using the rags that my mom gave, I just wanted to create something that it's so easy to wear that even 8 to 10-year-old kids can just wear an underwear, not tell anyone. If I take this product back to Nepal, nobody even won't know that you're on your period. So I think taboos has been like quite a big part in my journey along the way. And now I hear about like customer telling me like how they find it very difficult to go to toilet when they are in the office, like and the tradition of like putting the tampons and pads up your sleeve, that still happens, because I guess decades and decades we've been taught that periods are supposed to be discreet. In fact, even if you go now and go to supermarket and see in some of the product, you will still see the word discreet written. It's literally ingrained in our head. So we have to challenge this brand and have that word removed forever.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the challenges in all three situations is that you were either faced with a scenario where people either didn't know what to say or they ended up saying the wrong thing. I mean, what are the things that people can start to do, right? Like, sometimes it feels like the onus is on us to do the education, but what can we start to do to at least start to address, things, ignorance, etc., in these spaces that we occupy without it feeling like it's all down to us to be the remedy, if that makes sense?
I think that, open conversations, but also education is huge. And it doesn't just start with our generation. If we want to change things, we have to be looking at future generations, and particularly from the kind of period aspect. I mean, I know that's something that's, in schools now, boys and girls are taught separately about sex education. They're not actually taught together. They are segregated, and that's wrong. I mean, boys and girls, everyone should be given the same education about it. And I think it goes all the way along. We just need to increase knowledge. And one of the things that I'm really conscious of, and just talking about what you've been saying, Ruby, I really feel that the England sports team shouldn't have had to change their shorts from white to blue. Why? Why do they have to do that? If someone was you to go into a meeting and someone has a nosebleed, would you feel differently to someone if they had period blood showing? Why should we feel different about that? And these are the sort of conversations we need to open up and talk about more.
Yeah.
I guess I would add to that is a big part of my job is helping people to understand the privilege that they have in the spaces that they're able to access, and encourage that divergence from allyship to advocacy and standing up for people whose voices are not in the room. And so I think we've never lived in a time where there has been more resource available for education on all things that affect all different types of people. We personally, at our phase, we put out so many resources for people to get a better understanding of the world around them and what people are going through. And so, I'd say we're going to see generational change through advocacy in all its forms, whether that's sitting down with your 80-year-old grandmother or raising your nieces and nephews and kids, it's really important to carry that message on,
Yeah, 100%. And do you know any examples of policies, practices, behaviors that you've seen where people have demonstrated, I am an ally, or I am open to this conversation, like whether that's personal experiences or anything in the workplace?
Yeah, I think this year was quite surprisingly. We were having conversation with Channel 4 last year about advertising and everything, and then all of a sudden the conversation shifted to, actually, we don't have a period policy at our workplace. Would you help us implement, kind of way? And I think that's when we saw, okay, I think the companies are now more open to talk about this in the workplace and be an advocate and allies both for their staff, So this International Women's Day, we helped them implement a period policy at workplace. And as a part of it, not only there will be product available in the toilets everywhere, whether that's men's, women's, unisex, but they also offered free underwear to every team member within the Channel 4. And this was open to all the male person as well as the person who don't have periods. And I think till now they were saying when we do all these kind of perks within the company, but this was the highest uptake, up to 80% of the people took that offer. And this was just sparking the conversation, right? So that now the person who doesn't have a period actually can give their product to either their daughter or their partner or mom, and talk about topics like incontinence, periods, and that was quite, I think, remarkable that seeing big companies but Channel 4 has always been ahead of all the curves, I think so. So was really, really nice to be part of that.
Yeah, nice. Anything else? Guys seen anything else?
Policy-wise, there's some great examples. Even recently, speaking in sort of the trans and wider LGBTQ sphere, I always use L'Oreal as an example. L'Oreal have amazing policies, and as a result of L'Oreal changing their own policies and all of the brands that sit underneath them, we're seeing a lot of change in sort of like the beauty and retail industry. Currys just came out with like a groundbreaking policy for the UK in terms of trans healthcare. NatWest, their policy on healthcare is fantastic. Starbucks is another brilliant one. There's lots of big examples, and when we see big conglomerate companies making change, it trickles down, and hopefully that's the direction we're going in now.
Yeah, and I guess leadership is key, right? In all of these brands, it takes someone internally to kind of drive that change. Thinking back to your experience where, unfortunately, it was a CEO who, didn't quite get it. What advice would you give to leaders to know how to tackle the conversation, especially, beyond sort of needing to learn a little bit more? What could they be doing to drive that change internally?
I think if leaders don't know what they're talking about, then they should hire the people that do. I think it's really important to look at the structure of power in any company, and if they all look like each other, then there's the issue. But there are consultants, we're three different types of consultants here, but there are consultants that speak about all sorts of things and can go in and say, like, hey, you could use a bit of guidance here, or this is where your comms should look, both internal, external. The examples and the templates are there. You just have to reach out and ask for them.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thanks.
I think on the menopause topic at the moment, it's such a hot topic. And I think a lot of people are writing policies on that at the moment. And the thing that I would say to everyone is to be really fluid with that, because the information is really, really new. And we actually just don't know enough yet. When you look at research on menopause and you look at all the research that's out there, 70% of research has historically been done on men. So there's very little research specifically on women. And things are going to change. So what we are hearing now, if you've dipped into it and you're starting to hear the conversation and you're starting to listen into it, just be really conscious that we're all discovering this stuff. And it's really exciting because it's really positive for women of perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal ages, and I think it's going to open up so many things for them. But it's very new, and one of the things we've got to be really careful of, and I'm going to use this word, and I think it's an important word for everyone to be conscious of, is fear. Because when it comes to diversity and people, we have things ingrained in us that creates fear. And we have to be really careful around our language, but also how we can perpetuate that fear. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about HRT, and there being shortages of HRT, and women being kind of like really anxious and stressed because they can't get their HRT because it's run out, and et cetera, and things like that. And this is actually something where we've pushed the idea of HRT so much that it is the answer to everything, that actually it's causing issues. So I think we have to sit back a little bit, observe what's going on, and just be really conscious that things are gonna change. And there are lots of other things that you can be looking at. It's a wide subject. And when it comes to health and women's health, there are so many other things, and it's never, ever one thing that is the answer to anything. So just be conscious that there will be new things coming about and that you'll have to change your policies.
And could you define HRT for those who may not know?
Yeah, so hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
So the menopause, if you don't know, the menopause is when your hormones, estrogen and progesterone, start to drop. It starts in the perimenopause, which can happen for women from age 35 onwards. Everyone talks about late 40s. Actually, it can start very early on, and that's when periods start to become really irregular. Periods become very heavy. Women don't know when their period's going to come, so these are all things that woman is going through in the perimenopausal years, and it affects the body in so many different ways. And again, we don't know exactly how it affects us, but we do know that there are estrogen receptors all over the body. So it affects the brain, it affects the muscles, it affects the tendons, the ligaments, the joints. So this is why there are so many symptoms in menopause. And you'll hear lists of symptoms, and I think it goes up to about 200 now. It's quite ridiculous. And I think what we need to do is not be focusing on the symptoms, but thinking more about the solutions and how can you, within a workplace, provide solutions to some of these things.
Yeah, and just on that topic about menopause, earlier, I was kind of joking backstage about how I'm a lot more closer to menopause at this stage in my life, believe it or not, than I've ever thought, especially once I started reading into it. And I think this is where I wanted to explore, how do we just start having more conversations where people are a lot more open to the life stages that people are in? Because I think it's so easy for, say, women who are experiencing menopause to kind of just discuss it amongst their age groups, and sort of on the flip side, maybe younger individuals who are maybe experiencing the challenges of menstrual health and keeping it amongst themselves. How can we be a little bit more intergenerational so we're normalizing these conversations amongst each other, and it isn't just like, oh, that's just for like older people, or oh, that's just what the younger people are dealing with? How can we start to foster that a bit more?
So I think one of the things that we do and something that I think I learned from my mom, when I was growing up, we had this policy in the house. We had a policy in the house called open door policy. So if my mom goes to shop and then finds somebody who needs help, she literally would bring that person in the house, stay with us, feed them. We used to live nearby a hospital, so she often would come with somebody who had their kids, their parents, their partner in the hospital. And she would just say that you can stay at our home. And she used to look after them for a few days and take food and all this kind of thing. And I thought that was like slightly nuts, but very important lesson of that open door policy kind of thing. And something that I feel like that's something I have implemented in the workplace, and something that we do quite often is like every 6 months we do 360 review. This is anonymous. Everybody gets a review. Everybody gets to put a feedback to each other and what we can do. And one of the things that came often was like, I do live every Wednesday kick-ass chat, and my team members started saying like, could you bring different person on, not just talking about period, but also talking about menopause, talking about HRT, talking about any other hormone replacement treatment that people can get. And we have got people from all age, from 19 all the way to 55-year-old in our team. And that was quite eye-opening. And I think that is what we do. And then now, these days, we actively look for people who can come online and talk to us for 15, 20 minutes. That's all we want. But our team member can join online, watch it, learn something, and then perhaps like maybe later on we can liaise and they can talk in person as well. So I think that is one way you can do in the workplace kind of way. And honestly, once you are aware about periods, pregnancy, all this kind of thing, I would always highly recommend to go and talk to your mom, if you've got mom, and understand like how they went through, and was there something that they'd never said to you that you would want to hear. I think quite a lot of the time, I genuinely feel like my mom suffered in silence quite a lot because she didn't have anybody to talk to. So once you are aware about it, go and talk to your parents.
Yeah, I think we need to do a lot more listening, and that's how we understand. And I think there's this intergeneration factor that we've lost a lot of, and women traditionally weren't segregated into age groups, and we've become this kind of segregated into different age groups, women, and that's not actually who we are. Women are tribal, and the eldest woman in the tribe would be the elder who took on all sorts of different responsibilities and had lead roles, but also there was that support and that education. And we're all teachers and we're all students. And it's really important that we kind of have that cross-generational factor. And I think part of what's to blame is the way we are marketed to. And I think we are marketed to in small age group pockets or within decades. And when you look at the hormone journey that women go through, there are lots of similarities. You know, when hormones are going up through puberty, there's a lot of things that will happen in puberty that will happen at similar times in pregnancy, for example. So if you look at hormonal journeys, it's the change in hormones that is really significant. Not when the hormones are higher, when the hormones are lower, it's the changing in the hormones, when they either drop or when they go up. And this happens to women at different life stages. So you've got puberty, you've got pregnancy. So estrogen and progesterone levels through puberty go up from literally nothing up to a level, it's a picolillimeter is the measurement, which won't mean anything to anyone, but it goes literally from nothing until, as an adult, it goes up to around 400. But in pregnancy, it goes up to 5,000 to 30,000 picolillimeters. So your hormones in pregnancy are vast. And then what happens postnatally is you get this massive dropout. So many things happen to a woman postnatally that we are just not aware of. You know, postnatal depression, the baby blues affects about 80% of postnatal women. Postnatal depression is a smaller amount, but actually during COVID, it went up significantly. When they looked at studies during COVID, it went up to 45% of women suffering from postnatal depression. And part of this is to do with this hormonal journey. So we're not connecting enough to ourselves. And when we connect a little bit more to ourselves, we go, oh yeah, you know, so I say to women, don't you remember if you had a baby and you get those night sweats after you have a baby, or when you're during your period, or actually not during your period, it's usually in the after your period, in the middle of your cycle, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night having a hot flush or a night sweat. And actually, those symptoms that menopausal women get, you get them at other stages of your life as well. So we need to talk about this, and we need to understand it a lot more, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. One thing that kind of dawned on me, again, we were discussing this backstage, is that, I mean, none of us work in HR. But if we were to speak to HR and our people team about sort of empathy, because I think with a lot of the changes, be it hormonal, gender transition, et cetera, that we may go through, it may mean that we show up in work in very different ways. It may mean we have time off. It may mean that, you know, for instance, in some menopause policies, you know, there are now desk fans being introduced into the workplace to help women with hot flushes. So, you know, what is something that we could almost like say to HR and say, look, you know, an appeal to HR, this is kind of what we need to enable us to start having and normalizing some of these situations in the workplace?
I think the big misconception about HR is that it's set up to protect and comfort the employee, when realistically it's there to protect the employer more so than anything. And that's why having governing bodies behind HR like CIPD, who issue out policy advice, is vital. In terms of enacting change and how can we get that, I think it all depends on the company. I think we always think of any company as these huge, grand machines, and a lot of the time it's like one or two people that are power holders and decision makers. That's why it's so important to signpost throughout your whole sort of recruitment process into all of your policies who's an easy person to go and speak to, who you can and go and have conversations that are otherwise treated as like, oh, that's too emotional or that's erratic or whatever it is. We need to know at work who we can go and speak to and be that point of comfort and contact. And they might be the person below the HR person even, and then they can formulate it. A lot of like I say, when I'm going into companies, I'm always suggesting signpost support across the board. Like, who's your go-to person to have a chat with? Because a lot of, you know, like the big HR managers, they're not there to comfort you a lot of the time, you know, which is sad, but they're trying to disguise it by calling them people managers, but it's all the same thing, in my opinion.
Real talk. Okay. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about having someone to talk to. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people will feel different about how they want to talk. Some people won't feel comfortable talking. And again, this is just also having that understanding of how everybody is slightly different, and some people will be open and want to talk and others won't. And it's also understanding people to that level as well, isn't it? And I think that's where you have to have somebody who is there to fulfill that role. And just, again, it's about connection, it's about awareness, and it's about creating space for those kind of things to happen, for those kind of conversations to happen. You know, so are you generating spaces and creating times in order for the conversation to be open on whatever the subject is?
Nice. Gosh, I think I would say maybe go further back early, and then when you were at school, maybe at that time have maybe co-education around PHSE. And like you said, you know, we give 40 minutes of session for 40 years of your period life. So that's how much education we get about periods and understanding and empathy and all this kind of thing. These days I go to school. Last year I went to around 18 schools, and every school I went, I made it a mandatory that all the boys and the girls should be present when I go and do the talk. Otherwise it's not worth it. So pretty much every school had like 600 kids, 300 boys, 300 girls, come sit down, talk about periods, period pans, hold it. And I told them the only reason that you are here because I want you to show empathy towards the girl and what they go through every month for pretty much the rest of their life, right? And some might be high peaks, some might be low, pregnancy, menopause, those kind of things. But I think understanding from very young age, those people will then grow up to become the HR, then they know that, okay, you know, like, I understand where you're coming from, so I think.
Nice. And then last question before I go to Q&A. You know, a lot of what we've talked about is what's sort of affecting women. How do we take men on this journey with us? You know, how do we start to talk to them about periods, menopause, things that are impacting us, hoping that they'll get it, but who knows, they may run away. I don't know, I don't want to stereotype men. But, you know, how can we start to bring them into the conversation?
I think when people say that, often whenever I go do events or I'm selling underwear, there are often times where a mum, dad, and a daughter comes together, and then daughter and maybe mum would stop by, and I say like, oh, have you heard about period pants? And the reaction I get from dads are usually, oh, not my area, and just walk off kind of thing. And that is still very common till date as well. You get very, very rare dad being interested and talk about it. At that time, I normally just grab them and like, no, it's your business too, because you live together with it. When you live together, and again, that talk of empathy, I guess. So making compulsory like education kind of thing at school, being co-education about periods. And then maybe talking about menopause early on, you know, like, because we will go through that journey, and seeding that little words and terms actually means like, okay, they are quite aware about it. And workplace, like, I think, as I said, like the example of Channel 4 being involved, I thought that was great. And we often encourage like dads to sometimes write to us as well, like, or do a survey, and we say like, can you sit down with a partner next to you and do the survey? And often that is quite interesting as well, because maybe we might not think, as women might not think about like doing a survey together with a partner, but often we get like quite good response on those kind of emails as well.
Cool.
I think it's about being connected, and I'll tell you a story of I was doing a podcast with, and I was in a room with two men, and one was the sound guy, and the other was asking me the questions, but it was all about pregnancy and running. And we were talking about birth, and I said, well, when a woman gives birth, she's reborn, and she becomes a mother. And I could literally see the guy who was doing the sound, he had a lump in his throat, and he came to me afterwards and he just said, but that's what I feel. That's how I felt. I became a father and I became reborn as well. And I think if we just, again, allow ourselves that connection to and I hadn't really acknowledged and thought about that myself, how much it changed for him as well. And when I'm not talking about the kind of the practicalities of this, I'm talking about that sense of that feeling inside of you. And again, this comes down to connection. And I love to talk about science sometimes when it comes to connection, because I think sometimes we're a bit scared to connect to ourselves and it all seems a bit airy-fairy. But epigenesis is a study and a science which is all about how we evolve. And we are constantly evolving through generations and generations. So, and this is all life, plant, animal life. And as we go through and we evolve, things change. You know, how does the turtle, when it's born on the beach, know to scuttle in the direction of the ocean when it's first born? How does it know to do that? So this then comes back to our instinct. And we are all the same in that we are a species, we are all human, and this is what it means to be humankind. And we've all got those instincts in us, and it's all inside of us. And I think we lose that connection. And I think we need to bring that part into the workplace as well, because I think it's an important aspect of it.
100%, thank you.
Something I say a lot is that you're never going to make somebody, you're never going to educate somebody by making them feel stupid.
Yeah.
And I think when we, listen, the things that I talk about for a living and you both speak about for a living are so different, but the intersectional part of it is that we're speaking to a demographic that we're naturally assuming are either too silly, too masculine, too whatever to understand. And I don't believe that's the case. From having the experience of getting out there, I walk into the greyest of grey offices in the side of Canary Wharf with people in grey suits, and you just think, oh, they're just not going to care. But I meet some of the most empathetic people, and they just needed to kind of be told in the right way, and it be in an environment that's empowering them to listen and learn and then take action in any way that they can. And so, yeah, although I think, like I say, very different things that we talk about, but I think I think we need to move away from the idea that men are all this like brutish, stupid breed of people, because we kind of, from my point of view, like we need all men to carry the message. We need them to create change for us. You know, we're only going to create social change by having everybody collectively fight for it. So yeah, I guess that's my stance on it.
Yeah, and that's a great point to end on. So any questions? Any questions out there? Oh, we've got 1, 2, 3. Yes. Good to see.
Hi. Thank you so much for this panel. I have been waiting for this all day, so I'm like, yes, it's happening. It feels like a through line of all of what you've shared today has been about bodies, right? We've been talking about bodies and the kind of spaces that bodies take up. And I guess what I'm sort of observing is that women have more personal freedom than ever with their bodies, or it can seem like we do. And yet, so many of our rights around our bodies are being curtailed around the world. And I guess what I'm curious about from each of you is, in the communities that you are working with, where are you seeing signs of hope? Like, where are you kind of seeing the places where it's like, it's possible to believe that we are kind of on an upward trajectory when it comes to our personal liberation around our bodies?
I guess just speaking from the kind of the trans perspective again here, what gives me hope, I think when I talk about the beginnings of our charity, I always say when we launched the charity, ironically, it felt like the peak of anti-trans sentiment in this country. And then 3.5 years later, and I still don't think we're at the peak. And it's really easy to feel pessimistic in the role that I'm in. But what gives me hope is that I know that the cycle that we are in currently, in the way that we are spoken about, is something that is completely cyclical, and we can pull reference from the treatment of gay men and use that exact kind of like lineup of events, because the conversations that are had about us now are exactly the same as the conversations that were had about gay people post-AIDS epidemic. The language that's used around it is being repeated. And so what gives me hope is more so that I feel like the pendulum effect within this is that we've gone from no visibility to lots of visibility, and I hope we land somewhere in the middle where we can all just get along and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about women's bodies and how we, in my industry, I've worked in the fitness industry since I was 18, and goodness me, I was doing Jane Fonda cassette tapes when I was 14. So I've seen every single incarnation of fitness you can possibly imagine. I do think that there's an awful lot at the moment in social media, which is really detrimental. And there is a gym body that's being very much projected, and I do worry for younger generations seeing this, and I think that we need to move away. I think there are just like different pockets, and that one does seem to be growing, yet on the other side, there is this other huge body acceptance curve, which is that, you don't have to look a certain way to be fit and healthy. So there is like these two sides, and I think that I think the right one will grow. And I think it's the same thing. We're in a really exciting time at the moment. And like I was saying before about, we need to not get carried away, go down tracks. We need to keep our minds really open, and keep people on the right track. And this is where our language matters. This is a little aside thing, but it's an important one because it was mentioned in the news this week. And this is about how women give birth. And the presenter and a health journalist were talking about natural birth, as if any woman that has a C-section, it's not natural. That's the wrong language. It's a vaginal birth. Let's talk about it. Why can't we say the word vagina? Why can't we say that? So it's a vaginal birth or a C-section. It's not a natural birth. All birth is natural, of course it is. So we have to, keep that conversation going and just keep changing little things like that, and so that it becomes a better place.
I've been given the wrap-up sign, but one more question. One more question over here. Yeah. We could have been here for another 30 minutes.
I was very heartened to hear you say, Danielle, that you feel people are listening. And I think you, Jane, said that that's an important thing to do, because I think...
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Well, it's very important that we listen to the whole argument, the whole people's perspectives and people's lived experiences. And what I find is that as a menopausal woman, I find sometimes younger women don't want to hear about it. My daughter said, "Oh, you're wanging on about the menopause," People don't want to hear the full argument, and there's a lot in TikTok and social media where people are ab-reacting to tiny snippets. And it's like we're in an age of sort of fast politics and fast ideas, and, I'm an ally, I'm not an ally. I don't know, everybody's not listening to the whole argument. Do you think that that's a problem with social media? Because I think people need to go out and read books, and like you talk about, Danielle, actually meet people face to face and have long conversations, and there doesn't seem to be any appetite for long conversations or reading a whole book or listening to a whole podcast, and people are being shut down.
Algorithms have got a lot to answer for, haven't they? And I think that we can be selective, and we are being selected. So I think it's really important. People in the creative industries try and do something to change all of that. And one of the ways is to stop marketing to just certain age groups. We've got to widen it right out, so that we have conversations. And when it comes to, I always talk about the hormonal journey, not just pregnancy or postnatal or menopause, perimenopause, because where you've been is important to where you're going, and the more you're conscious of where you're going, the better that's going to be. So we need to be looking forwards and backwards, because what happens in our past really affects us later on. And there's all sorts of women's health conversations that we should be talking about. Women who have endometriosis, PCOS, this is really huge. And their journeys and their story is really important as well. So there's lots more than just the menopause that we should be talking about.
One more question.
I'm allowed one more question. Actually, this is to Danielle. I am an employer of quite a few people, and I'm a woman. I have given birth, I am in my menopause, and so I feel really comfortable and confident about talking all of that kind of thing to the men and the women in my team. What I would really like to hear is some sort of practical, not just about the trans journey, but men and what things they go through. When I'm having to have difficult conversations with my team, or they're having to come to me and have difficult conversations about things that I just genuinely don't know very much about. I can read about it online and when those times arise. But how would you were saying that your employer approached you in quite a difficult way and asked way too many questions. This was your first story in the beginning. How should we approach, if somebody comes and wants time off or wants to talk about some issues, how as an employer should we react to that? I know there's the listening, but are there some practical tools that we can use, that there's the do's and the don'ts when we get, that when people come and want to have time off, or, whatever they might be asking, when it's maybe a topic that we just don't know much about, because I know loads about the menopause and pregnancy and all of that kind of stuff, but I don't know so much about trans, or it might be any other issue that I can't even think of right now.
Yeah, I'd imagine there are, as an employer of a team, there's probably about 500 different topics that we could apply that to and say, like, how are you going to speak to employees about religious holidays and religious celebrations? How are you going to speak about racial issues at work, or any other things that are affected under protected categories? And you're right, and it's tricky because my community makes up between 0.3 and 0.5% of the population. So chances are you're either not going to have somebody at work that is affected by these issues, or that you might have very few people that are affected by these issues. And I don't think that anybody would ever expect their employer to know absolutely everything. And I think it's more so about sort of the issue that I took with my boss is that she definitely wasn't operating with the 2 ears, 1 mouth mindset. It was that she needed to know absolutely everything about the specifics of my experience. And the resources for her to know not to do that are in abundance. So I guess if you're asking, it's a tricky one to advise on because it's so broad. If you're asking those questions, you're probably the right person anyway, and you're probably gonna not make those horrendous mistakes because she was so closed-minded and she didn't really care about what she said anyway. I guess just taking on advice from people that have that lived experience, do a bit of research. And as an employer, like I mentioned earlier with the CIPD, they have so many people management guides and stuff like that to refer to. I guess it's just a case of like not admitting when you don't know everything and just having looking into it a little bit, or bringing somebody in, depending on the size of the company, that does know a bit more about it to talk on it.
You've mentioned CIPD quite a lot. I do actually know what that is, but from a practical, recording and all of that kind of stuff, I think it'll be really helpful for anybody to be listening to this to use that as a resource. So
I guess because we were speaking so much about HR and people management, CIPD is who accredits all HR professionals. And they offer training courses, and we're talking everybody from like low-level HR execs all the way up to the biggest HR directors of huge companies in the country. But they have free resources to companies of all sizes that kind of give a bit of guidance on how we can make work a better place for everybody. So yeah, just for clarity, that's who I was referring to. And so organizations like that. There's also Unite, the union. Unite have got so many resources on what affects people of minorities in the workplace. There's loads of stuff like that available through Unite as well. I hope I answered that. I realised I could have gone off on lots of different tangents.
I think quite a few charity as well can come and do a talk, right?
Yeah.
In workplaces and stuff. So
yeah,
we
one
did
of the biggest parts
Mermaids.
of my job is as running the charity is going into workplaces and having the chat. Yeah.
Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much. It is a wrap. If we can just give a round of applause to this awesome panel.